If you are single right now in 2025, it's probably a lot better than you think. There are just these weird societal rules that we all hear these days. They're, I think, so hardwired into our minds to the point where we actually believe them and we are trying so hard to follow them. Society will always try to tell us things like, if you're not in a relationship by a certain age or not married, then there's something wrong with you, it's pretty much over, you've run out of time. And then we'll also say that life only has purpose when you're in a relationship and you're not happy or can't be unless you're in one. But let me just tell you, there is absolutely nothing wrong with being alone. Because here's a quote that I always live by: it's better to be alone than with someone who makes you feel like you're alone. Unfortunately, these days, given the societal rules I just mentioned that a lot of us believe, I see many who are just settling for mediocrity. And what I mean by that is people who are getting into relationships with others that they're not really happy with, just getting into relationships just to say, hey, look, I'm in a relationship now, so stop pestering me about it. Also getting into relationships with people just because they need a place to stay or to get by in this economy. And then again, just because people don't want to be alone. I think for a lot of people these days, they are waking up now, especially the younger generation, to not believe society's lies anymore. You know, we don't want to feel bad that we're not doing what we're supposed to be doing, and we don't want to feel like we're rushed or that the clock is ticking, we're running out of time. Now, I'm only 25, and I know I still have a lot more experience to go through in life, and I do know that I want to get married and have kids one day. But for the time being, you know, let's just say I've been single for a year now, and I think it really can teach you a lot about yourself, because it's always like that time for self-reflection and then self-improvement. I think it should also be a time where you enjoy being in that solitude, to where it's really just giving you a peace of mind and you are appreciating just how much of a blessing it actually is, because you know that, you know, you're able to just really focus on yourself, do more things for yourself. And I know for a fact that I have definitely been able to. Because, you know, there's this one YouTuber I used to watch, and he would always say things like, people are just so wrapped up in just getting into a relationship. They're like, you know, if I was in a relationship, I'd be so much more happy, I'd be more comfortable with myself. And then they get into relationships and they actually miss being single. And that's the thing, is that it's kind of like, enjoy your solitude now, because it's going to get to a point where one day you might get into a relationship and miss that. And that's not saying that any relationship you get into that you're going to miss being single and that you're going to try to get out of it. It's just saying that, like, if you get to a point where you might have, you know, a family one day, you'll remember, you know, those times where, you know, you were single and you might have had more free time on your hands to just go out and do whatever you wanted to. That is, if you wanted to, you know, go out with your friends, you know, spend more time at the gym. I mean, whatever that might be. I also think it's very important now, especially for the younger generations. And like I said, a lot of us have been waking up, and I think that's because, you know, we watch a lot of videos online, and, you know, everybody's wanting to give advice. And, you know, I watch a lot of videos of, you know, the older generations talking about how, you know, they wish at a certain age, like say when they were in their teens or their 20s, that they didn't get so caught up into getting into relationships, because they wish that they could have done more things before they did and just spent more time focusing on themselves. I also just wanted to tell y'all a little story about my awakening from the societal lies. So, you know, I always say in my previous videos that I was in a relationship for 5 years, and it was the only relationship I'd been in my whole life, like serious. And, you know, we had moved in with each other at a certain point, and I had moved cities to do so. But then, you know, it gets to the point in life, people And there's nothing wrong with it. People just grow apart and want to do different things in life, and then they just think it's best that, they go their separate ways. But it got to a certain point at the end of the relationship where we were both we weren't really happy anymore. I think we had both kind of just lost feelings for each other. You fall out of love. It's just life. Things happen. But the thing about it is that we didn't know how to bring it up to each other. And it's like, even though we were both unhappy, we still chose to be in a relationship just because we didn't want to be alone or start over. And then a decision had to be made eventually because we just couldn't keep denying it anymore. But it got to the point where we came to a mutual understanding and we just decided it was best to go our separate ways. But then I actually ended up moving back to my hometown, and, I'm still a human being. Being with someone for 5 years is a very long time, and, it did hurt, but once I moved back, I really just wanted to see it as a fresh new start, and I guess just really try to see now what I can do for myself. Now, it's kind of crazy to me because I've been enjoying being single so much to the point where I really have no desire to date anymore. I mean, that is at this point in my life right now, because, I did say that I do want to get married one day. But given, the time, like I had said, I've been single for a year, and I know others will say, like, well, try being single for like 10 or 20 years. But, this time has really just allowed me to appreciate it so much. Like I said, I mean, it truly has been a blessing. You really do have a lot more time on your hands. You just have that freedom. And, I go to the gym. I've always gone to the gym. Like, I'll never stop. And, I've really been able to focus a lot more on my YouTube career that I want to start one day, I guess. And, I've actually gotten back into drawing like I used to, and painting. And, it's just really gives you a time to maybe take up some new hobbies. And also what I find, just really crazy too, is that I actually have reconnected with so many people, like friends that I haven't seen in years. I saw this post on Facebook the other day that I'm gonna put up on the screen for you guys in a second, but it was talking about being single is underrated. And I'm sorry if this post comes off as like cringy or corny, any of that, but I saw it and I thought it just sounded very true. Being single is underrated. No emotional roller coasters, no mind games, no late night overthinking, just peace, growth, and freedom. You call the shots, you set the vibe. Nobody gets to disturb your emotional stability unless you let them. Being single isn't lonely, it's a luxury. Protect your energy, elevate your life. The right love will never feel like emotional torture. Until then, enjoy your peace like it's the finest wine. But yeah, I think that quote is 100% true, that in today's world, being single is underrated while relationships are overrated. And, what's really sad is I think especially toxic ones, in the media are definitely romanticized. And, at the very end where it says, enjoy your peace like it's the finest wine, I don't want to see it in that way, probably because I don't drink anymore, but I would see it as enjoy your peace like it's the finest water or tea. And that sounds like something that, Uncle Iroh would say from The Last Airbender. And, the last thing I wanted to say was, just, given the times that we're in now, I even did a video on this too, saying just how cooked, modern dating is. And, you hear all of these stories from both men and women where, they might have gotten married and they're just not happy, they're actually telling people, like urging them, like, please, like, stay single, don't get married, just don't do any of that. You know, keep your peace. And when I hear stuff like that, it kind of does discourage me and make me feel a lot better that I am single. But then, you know, you kind of think about too one day, you know, for those that do want to, you know, get married, you know, you think about just how everything is and how cooked it is. You know, will that right person ever come along? I was actually talking to a friend about this the other day, where I said, I do, of course, want to meet the right person one day, but at the same time, if it never happens, I'm kind of very, like, understanding and accepting of that fact, just given how, you know, things in the world are now. People don't really want relationships anymore. You know, that is serious relationships. You know, they're all about hookup culture. You know, they have their dating apps, options, all of these different things. And yeah, I would just much rather have my sanity and my mental health just be in order. And like I said, you know, I'm always going to stick by that quote. You know, I'd rather be alone than with someone who makes me feel like I'm alone. But yeah, I'm very curious to hear what you guys have to say about this topic. And, you know, I always joke with people sometimes, you know, saying how great it is to be single because, you know, you don't have to spend your money on another person. You know, you can hopefully save money and you don't have to worry about being cheated on, so many other things. But yeah, other than that, I love you guys. Hope you enjoyed this video today, and I'll see you in the next one. All right, bye.